Welcome back to Gold Derby. I am Marcus James Dixon, and I'm here with Ray Richmond, Daniel Montgomery, and Denton Davidson, and we are going to tell you what we think is going to win Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars. It's December. We have all updated our predictions, and right now we're kind of 2 versus 2. Ray and I think Killers of the Flower Moon is going to win. Daniel and Denton think Poor Things is going to win. Ray, why don't you start? Why are you on the Killers bandwagon?
I think just respect for Scorsese and for the stars in that film. It's got so much star power with DiCaprio and De Niro and obviously Willie Gladstone has become a breakout. And it's beautiful, movies that are over 3 hours seem to have an edge in Best Picture. I'm not completely sure why, although, and I think I figured it out. This would be like the longest, if it were to win, it would be the longest Best Picture winner since Lawrence of Arabia in the early 60s.
Wow.
However, since it's 3 hours and 26 minutes, but it really holds your interest. I think it's really well done. And I think it's the kind of thing that the voters are going to go for. In terms of versus Poor Things, I love Poor Things. I probably loved it even more than Killers of the Flower Moon. Not that those are terribly comparable in terms of their tone. I think it's a little too offbeat to be a Best Picture winner. Although
more offbeat than Everything Everywhere All at Once.
No, I guess not. That's true. But I'm not sure that they give it to something that offbeat more than once every 4 or 5 years. I think they like to show, we can be conventional too. It's just hard to see that getting something over a Scorsese movie. Although Scorsese movie has never won Best Picture, has it? I'm trying to remember.
The Departed.
Oh, The Departed, and he won for that too. Yeah.
Okay, so Daniel and Denton, why Poor Things? Try to convince us.
Well, for me, it was just afterwards, I was mind blown. I mean, it's one of those movies where you sit there and after the crowd is chattering, there's gasps throughout the audience while you're watching. I'm excited for more people to see it when it comes, because it comes out on December 8th. And I think when people see it, they're going to realize how original it is. And it's a fantasy. Emma Stone gives her best performance, and Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe are firing on all cylinders. The production design is insanity. It just has all of the qualities that you want in a movie. The script, the direction, the cinematography, everything is just top notch. So for me, it was just mind-blowing to watch, and it really made me more of an Emma Stone fan than I was before. I think it's her best performance she's ever given. Mark Ruffalo is fantastic as like sort of that winking devil that we love to see in movies, and then Willem Dafoe, he's always great. So for me, it was just that mind-blowing and originality factor. And I don't think it's too weird for Academy voters. What I find interesting is that none of us have Oppenheimer, and that's by far the most overwhelming choice for most people. So we're all a little off the beaten path.
Yeah, and for me, I year after year after year, I look at these predictions and I see what looks good on paper that always rises to the top of our odds, and sometimes stays there until Oscar night, and they always seem to lose. The Irishman went 0 for 10. The Power of the Dog only won 1 Oscar. Roma, The Revenant. These films that look like they're on their way to do it, then kind of trip up at the finish line. So I look at the list and I think, okay, what looks good on paper? There's your like 2, 3, or 4. What's my number one? What's the passion pick that people are going to be passionate about? And I feel like, they gave it to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was a strange movie. This is also a strange movie, though it has more of that, historical period film kind of.
It's more snobby.
It's more snobby.
It's definitely more snobby.
Yeah, and it has Yorgos Lanthimos, who has a growing reputation at the Oscars. First getting the screenplay nomination for The Lobster, the foreign film nomination for Dogtooth, and then really blowing up with The Favorite. And now this might be his moment. Although I will preface that, as a caveat, one of our writers, Jeffrey Kerr, pointed something out, and he wrote a whole article about it that's fascinating. In the last 15 years, only one film has won Best Picture whose director had a previous Best Picture nominee. Every other, only Birdman, who Alejandro González Iñárritu previously had Babel get in. No other Best Picture was from a director with a previous Best Picture nominee in the last 15 years. And I'm like, that can't be true. And I looked and it was true, which if that stays true, that rules out like the top 6 films in our odds, including Poor Things and Killers of the Flower Moon. So that's why we're all wrong.
Well, another thing about Poor Things is it feels like old Hollywood in a lot of ways. It feels like a movie from the 30s. There's some nods to some classics, even nods to something like Freaks. And it also is funny. You don't walk away from the movie, as disturbing as it is, you don't walk away feeling icky or disturbed. You walk away feeling like, wow, that was,
it's got kind of
it's just a great, you feel great, and you want to go talk about it with all your friends as soon as you're done watching it.
It is beautifully done, incredibly original, and I agree that Emma Stone turns in her best performance, which is saying something. And I think that she's going to be very hard to beat for actress. But as far as winning for picture, I don't know. I agree that Oppenheimer has all of the earmarks of huge number of nominations and shutout. I keep seeing that headline in my head: shocking Oppenheimer shutout.
No, I'm going to stand up for Oppenheimer.
No, I mean it's obviously gonna win some below the line stuff and some tech stuff.
Yeah,
but the thing that worries me is the Killers shutout, like the Irishman shutout, just because in the craft categories, it's impressive enough that it's going to get some of those nominations, but it's not as showy as like the costumes of Poor Things or the sound of Oppenheimer. It's not. It doesn't have that kind of grandeur in terms of the most obvious and showiest crafts.
I don't know that Killers is leading our odds in any category right now, so that worries me about Killers.
That's an interesting observation.
I think if there's a dark horse, it could be Maestro.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I think Maestro is going to do very well, and I feel like this is the year that Bradley wins something.
In my predictions, I try to update them every week or so, and I keep switching back and forth between Killers at number 1 and Oppenheimer at number 1. I switched to Killers again from Oppenheimer this morning after the New York film critics gave Killers the big award, and then they gave Christopher Nolan the director award, which we'll talk about director in a moment. But so currently I do have Killers, but am I crazy to think that Barbie could still win this? I mean, it was the blockbuster of blockbusters. It could win picture, and I mean, it could win some of these below the lines as well. It could win screenplay. It could win a lot on Oscar night, but it's really not a traditional.
I'm just trying to think, if I'm an Academy voter, in the privacy of my home while I'm filling out my ballot, that I'm really going to elevate Barbie to the top. As much as I was entertained by it, and as wildly original as it is, I don't feel like it's definitely a nominee. It's hard to imagine it being a winner. It just doesn't have enough heft.
I want to first of all correct myself. Killers of the Flower Moon is leading our odds for adapted screenplay, so I want to make sure I get that in there. Barbie is barely ahead in the odds right now for costume design. So I mean, it could get some of that below the line love. It's right above Poor Things and in Killers of the Flower Moon right now for costume design. So, I mean, it's possible, but it has a great message, but for me, that's more of an non-traditional pick than
Poor Things.
Poor Things would be. Yeah.
Another
more of a
good dark
non-traditional
horse is
pick than Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think Barbie would be is so the opposite of snob appeal that I worry that voters are still going to be a little bit too they could love the movie and still look at it and think, but Best Picture for the doll movie.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So.
And I feel like the Best Picture at least has an acting front runner typically, and I don't know that Barbie has an acting front runner.
No.
Ryan Gosling early on was getting a lot of praise, but he's kind of been overshadowed in recent weeks.
It's hard to imagine him getting it over, Cillian Murphy or Bradley Cooper.
What I find interesting about Best Picture is just who's going to be nominated, because it's really tricky towards those 8th, 9th, and 10th slots. I feel like we've sort of shaped things up at Gold Derby for the top spots, but like right now I have Saltburn getting in. It's my hope Diction, just because I love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that can happen. It could happen. But
that one might be too weird for the Oscar voters to slurp up. I don't know if they're going to go for that.
But we also have things like The Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall, and it's like, are we going to get to non-English language films in there? Is Past Lives going to hold up? I mean, Past Lives was killing it in the middle of the year. They were the top dog until these fall releases. So I'm curious to see how Past Lives can hold up across the board.
American Fiction is also
actress. So
American Fiction is also a good dark horse. Not as good a dark horse as Maestro, but I think that's going to get in I think as a nominee. And if things fall the right way, it could build some momentum for winning.
I love American Fiction.
Me too.
Everywhere I keep hearing about people loving American Fiction, and that feels like, I mean, I don't think they're comparable in the quality or how they handle their subject matter, but it feels like the Green Book kind of feel good choice. That the Academy goes for. It's a little bit more traditional, but it's also got kind of an edge to it that will appeal to younger and older Oscar voters. It won the People's Choice Award in Toronto, which is a huge bellwether, and everyone seems to love it. And so that feels like that passion choice. And it's a first-time director, doesn't have a previous Best Picture nomination, so if it continues the trend, that would be the film to do it.
I also wanted to bring up. I wanted to bring up my personal favorite movie of the year, which I think is a lock it in, SAG Ensemble winner, The Color Purple. And this, speaking of passion votes, I mean, I'm hearing stories of people in the theaters crying. And Ray, you and I saw it together. I didn't look at you if you were crying. I hope you didn't look at me if I was crying. But it was so moving, and it's got the cheers in the middle of the film as some of these songs play out. Like I said, SAG Ensemble, it's a lock as far as I'm concerned, but can it win Best Picture? I think
I wasn't crying. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, no, I don't think anyone's going to dislike it. If anything, I was impressed because The Color Purple, the original, is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one I was obsessed with as a kid. I don't know how many times I've seen it. So I went into I actually have a story. I went into this screening and I sat down and I was talking to the person next to me, and I was like, I really hope this is.
Was it Oprah?
I really hope this is good. And he goes, I hope it's good too. I'm the production designer. And it was. I mean, I was so impressed with it. That's the one you walk away with feeling like full of hope and joy. It's just so warm. The music.
Wait a minute. When you're sitting next to the production designer, don't you have to? And you're at a screening. Don't you have to watch it a different way? Don't you have to sort of like
No,
exaggerate your looking at it and your reactions?
He was very down to earth. I was actually, there was a couple times where I would like lean over and I'd be like, did you build that? Like, is that real? Like there's this moment where they're like walking on this like sort of phonograph thing, Fantasia and Taraji P. Henson.
Oh yeah.
Sort of fantasy performance. It was really cool. So I mean, a lot of crafts. I just interviewed the costume designer, and she actually was a costume assistant on the original. And
Oh wow.
so there's a lot of really cool stories, and of course, Quincy Jones, Oprah, and Steven Spielberg are all involved, and they're all. I mean, Oprah's all over LA right now.
Oprah's making the rounds.
I mean, if Oprah's, out in public, people are paying attention and watching. So
Oprah got Obama elected. You never know.
so there's going to be some passion for The Color Purple in just the fact that it took so long for them to show it to anybody. So everyone was kind of like, what's wrong with it? And I was so relieved to find out that there's nothing wrong with it. Like it really is a fantastic film.
I think after about
was
10
it the first
minutes,
one
I'm like,
shut out?
Yeah, first one was shut out.
First one was shut out. That could play a role this time too, where maybe there's some residual feeling of we need to honor it this time.
yeah.
There was
about
actually interesting behind the scenes documentary that they did with like Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah and back years ago, and there was a lot of backlash to the original film, and that Steven Spielberg directed it as a white man, that like Spike Lee was sort of leading the charge that was anti-Color Purple. So, and Whoopi Goldberg was furious. So I mean, there was a lot of backstory that goes along with how The Color Purple went 0 for 11 or however that was.
Yeah, and back to what you were saying, where it was, the last film to screen and people were wondering what was wrong. After about 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, good. It doesn't suck. It's actually really good. And then the cast comes out and Oprah comes out and the audience doesn't stop crying the whole time.
No, they
Every
went
10 minutes,
nuts.
the audience is crying.
Oh my God. Yeah. It still doesn't feel like the best picture. I think it feels like it's definitely going to compete fully for acting awards.
Oh yeah.
And Danielle Brooks, I mean, we'll discuss this in our next slugfest, but Danielle Brooks, I feel like it's got to be turning into a favorite in that category for supporting.
And I agree with Marcus about the SAG ensemble, because it's full of the cast is so big and so impressive, and they have people that they're both from film and the television world. I mean, everyone's worked with Taraji and Danielle, and or they just love Oprah, and and there's really I also love in that film that there's really nice little Easter eggs that I don't want to spoil for people, but there's a lot of homages to the original.
And Coleman Domingo is amazing too.
He is. Do we want to talk about director a little more specifically?
Yes. Who do we all have real quick for director? I have Christopher Nolan. This is one where even though I don't have Oppenheimer winning picture, I mean they tend to split these two categories quite a bit. I have a list somewhere. Okay,
in the Oscars, I thought they usually align more in the Oscars.
They used to, but in the preferential ballot system with 10 Best Picture nominees, and Best Director is a plurality vote. So they've split a lot more than they used to.
Yeah. So we have Coda and Jane Campion splitting Green Book and Cuarón, Moonlight and Chazelle, Spotlight and Iñárritu, 12 Years a Slave and Cuarón, Argo and Ang Lee, and Crash and Ang Lee. And that's all within the past 20 or so years. So it's happening more and more. So do we all have Christopher Nolan? Who doesn't have Christopher Nolan?
I have Scorsese.
Ooh, okay. How come?
I felt like he, crazy. I felt like he did the better directing job. That seemed like a very difficult film to pull together all the elements and make it flow. And he did a beautiful job with it. And it stayed with me. I mean, maybe again, it's the storyline. That film stayed with me more than Oppenheimer did. Oppenheimer, it seems like it seemed very, very talky to me. I mean, I liked it well enough, but it very talky, and it's basically a story about a bomb going, a bomb. So Hollywood knows a lot about bombs already. But no, I just think Scorsese did the better directorial job. But Lanthimos could also sneak in and take it. That is not out of the realm of possibility. I could see Scorsese and Nolan splitting the vote at the top, and Lanthimos sneaking in.
I do think that Nolan has maybe a little, I guess you could say, an extra credit point because he's never won and he does have this overdue factor. And so if they really get that story out there, I think that could push him over the edge if it is him versus Scorsese.
Yeah, I think that's what I have happening. I have Christopher Nolan winning for Oppenheimer on that overdue narrative. It feels a little bit like Jane Campion, like even when The Power of the Dog was starting to, waver and wane and it was sort of slipping in basically every other category. It was sort of never, even when it was looking like it wouldn't win anything else, it was never really in doubt that Jane Campion would win. And because she'd won everything up to that point, she had the overdue narrative. So it just feels like if that sentiment is out there for Christopher Nolan, that it's time, then he could steamroll and win Best Director, and Best Picture might be an entirely different conversation.
Two other names I would throw into the mix as possibilities and possibly real good shots at nominees, at least. It would be Greta Gerwig and Bradley Cooper. I could see both of them potentially have, staking a claim in winning.
Yeah.
Everybody, I mean, we all think it's foregone conclusion that it's Scorsese or Nolan, but not necessarily.
And Greta and Bradley, they're both actors, and every once in a while an actor does get in here, unless you're Ben Affleck.
Yeah. The director's branch is sort of notorious for being maybe even a notch snobbier than than some of the others. It's hard for actors to get in, but I have Bradley getting in too, just because I think Maestro will have so much momentum. And then they always throw in one director where you're like, what? Like, it seems to happen every year. And it's usually a foreign director. So my pick this year is Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall as sort of the what? And I see that, Daniel, you have Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. So me and you are sort of on the same page, at least in our way of thinking. We're just going about it with two different directors.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who that person is going to be. Justine Triet is a good other pick. I think probably be sixth in my predictions. But I think she makes sense because she would be that snobby choice, and would also be a way for the Oscars to avoid Best Director so male yet again. Where it's looking more and more conspicuous to have a lineup without any women in it. So I think I currently have all men in mind, because I don't currently have Greta Gerwig in my predictions, just because, again, I think the snob appeal that Barbie lacks might hurt it in some of these categories. But yeah, Glazer, huge snob appeal for him as a director and his film. It could be that classic, picture, director, screenplay, nothing else. Although it could also get into sound, which is another conversation. But yeah, that I'm right now thinking Zone of Interest is the likeliest dark horse, art house film that could get in.
I think Greta, I don't have her in my pick ship. I'm going to probably put her in there. I don't think we can discount Greta despite the snobbery, because there's going to be appreciation for her basically saving the summer movie-going season with that film. And it would make them look good to put her in there.
I do have Greta in fourth place. I'm really not even considering taking her out. I think she's pretty safe, knock on wood. But fifth place, I just added Alexander Payne for The Holdovers. I don't think we talked about The Holdovers in picture. If we did, I forgot.
I think it's going to get nominated. I will.
Yeah, I think it'll get quite a few nominations across the board, and
I think it's got a real shot at screenplay to win.
Yeah. And acting, a couple acting trophies,
And
maybe,
it's you know,
maybe three nominations for
I've been
acting.
doing a lot of interviews for it, and you know, the first time screenwriter David Hemmingson is you know, this guy who had nothing but TV credits. It's a great story about, you know, how he was just walking along one day and then he gets a call out of the blue from Alexander Payne and thinks it's his friend punking him. was about to say screw off and hang up on it. But he, you know, he had seen a pilot that Hemmingson had written, same subject matter. And I think it's a terrific film, beautifully done. I feel like that's going to get it. And
he's making the rounds too, Alexander. We saw him at an event or two.
Yeah.
Anyone else that we haven't mentioned? Maybe Celine Song for Past Lives. Cord Jefferson, American
Her best
Fiction.
bet is probably going to be the screenplay. You know, if that film doesn't hold on anywhere else, I foresee it as at least a screenplay.
And Cord Jefferson, American Fiction. If Daniel's right that this has a passion vote, I mean, he could ride the wave and get in there.
Yeah.
Or I can see him winning a lot of first-time director awards.
Oh yeah, at the DGA for sure. Well, cool. Any other final thoughts?
I think Jeffrey Wright's going to get in though for American Fiction for sure.
Yeah.
I would just say my final thought is I think it's a great year for movies. I mean, I've been really enjoying this Oscar season more than some recent years. So
it is a really good year.
I really have been liking. Maybe they've been holding off some over the last couple pandemic years and saving up, but I love this Oscar season.
If you were an Oscar voter, who would you vote for picture and director? Mine would be The Color Purple picture, Christopher Nolan director.
Mine would be Poor Things and Yorgos.
Okay.
Mine would be so not going to happen. And I still have, you know, films to see and catch up on. But right now, at this moment in time, picture, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and director, Emerald Fennell for Saltburn.
Okay. And Ray?
I think for picture, it would be American Fiction. And director Scorsese. All
of our picks are so different.
Do you guys have any shout outs for something that you don't want people to forget about or miss? Because I have one that is going to be on Netflix. It's not quite out yet, but I think everyone should watch it. And it's Society of the Snow by J.A. Bayona. That's my recommendation. I think it could be a real front runner for best international feature. And I think it deserves more than that, but we'll see how things play out.
I guess mine would be Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse for a Best Picture nomination. It's been a while since we've had an animated film get in there, but I think that would be so cool.
Mine is All of Us Strangers. I would love people to watch that film. And, you know, really, you know, Andrew Haigh makes such small, intimate movies so that they don't usually get the kind of traction or the attention they deserve because they look so modest. But they're really kind of emotionally epic.
Mine would be The Killer, the David Fincher movie, which I really liked a lot. It's just so many of it could potentially compete in a lot of the crafts categories. I'm talking to the sound guy today. It was just very distinctively, beautifully done film. Reminds me though, there was one thing we didn't discuss before we end this. We didn't bring up Napoleon. And maybe that was on purpose. But you know, it's a hit, and a lot of people seem to love it. I guess not necessarily any of us.
It could be a below the line juggernaut.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to have gotten, like, the critical reviews, you know, the reviews were kind of soft on it. Like it doesn't, you know, it feels like it might be one of those craft plays. But you know, again, I've been surprised before. And what I love about this stage of the Oscar race is that it's still all possibilities. Like there's nothing 100% guaranteed, nothing set in stone. You know, no one has started steamrolling yet that we can say, okay, this race is over, that race is over. I love when it's all possibilities and no one can possibly be wrong yet. So
Ridley could crack the directors group, probably not, but you never know.
If he can get into, I feel like he should get in at the Golden Globes, and if like that would be the first sort of hurdle for Ridley, because they clearly love him. I mean, he win for the Martian. So I mean,
that hilarious comedy.
best comedy. But yeah, I mean the Globes love Ridley, so if Ridley can get in at the Globes, that would be a great start for him and Napoleon.
Well,
I wonder if the Globes are going to be different this year, because before they all have foreign stuff and British things, but with the dissolution of the Hollywood Foreign Press, you wonder if it's going to be a way different Globes now.
And they used to sort of spread the wealth. It felt like a little more like they wanted to sort of appease all of the studios as much as possible. They wouldn't, it wouldn't be like necessarily the Emmys where HBO has 6 out of 7 nominees. So it will be interesting to see how the Golden Globes pan out.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for watching. Please go to Gold Derby right now and make your Oscar predictions, as well as Grammys, Emmys, Golden Globes, SAG Awards, Daytime Emmys, and some reality shows as well. Thank you, everybody.